Winning Blueprint presents.
Draft Zone.
Welcome to the Draft Zone. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. This is the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up. And what we aim to do with this series is take a look at the 2013 NFL Draft of every single team in the National Football League, break down their draft, look at every individual pick, give them a grade using our baseball grading scale, single, double, triple, home run. There are no strikeouts in the Draft Wrap-Up series, as we can never tell if these players are going to pan out or not in the National Football League. And you can't tell if a team reached for a player or not. One team's first round selection is another team's second round selection. So there are no strikeouts here in the Draft Wrap-Up series. However, we're not just looking at the player selected itself. We're also looking at the pick, how it was made, when it was made, and how the player might impact the team in the 2013 season and moving forward. So we'll give them a grade, average up all the picks made by that team. In this case, we're talking about the AFC West champion Denver Broncos. We'll look at their whole entire draft, get an aggregate score, and give the Broncos a grade for the whole entire draft. So we'll look at every single selection made, grade it out, average it together, get a score for the Denver Broncos. So with that being said, I've got my big board behind me. As we all know, the handy dandy pointer no longer with us. So in his place, I've got the magic wand. Let's go to the board and break down this Broncos draft. So we look at the needs. Defensive line, if you're the Broncos, your defense was really good last season. But you can always get better on the defensive line. In the playoffs, you were ran on. The Ravens had no problems running the football. Ray Rice had a really productive day against you. You want to clean up your defensive line, stop the run, continue to get to the quarterback. It's going to be a little bit harder now that Elvis Dumervil is not there. So that's a lot of production you have to replace. And if you're the Broncos, you made a mistake. So did Elvis Dumervil. There's no going back now, but that's a lot of production. We're talking about 10.5 sacks. That's hard to come by in this league. And you don't have one guy on your roster right now that can get you that production. And so linebacker, defensive line, both needs for you right now. Running back, always an issue in Denver. It's always been running back by committee. There isn't an explosive back in your backfield outside of Ronnie Hillman. Still really haven't seen that explosiveness that I want to see from him yet either. But in terms of running backs, Willis McGahee has been there. So has Noshawn Moreno, but both of those guys run similar to me. Not a lot of burst, not a lot of explosion there. So you could use a back that can be more consistent for you. I thought that Willis McGahee was that consistent back for you, but he went down with an injury. And so looking to probably replace him in the mix this season. Wide receiver, look, to me, that's a need because after your two guys out wide, and of course I'm speaking of Decker and Thomas, outside of those guys, who do you have that can play out wide? We know you got Wes Welker in the offseason to play in the slot, but say Demaryius Thomas goes down with an injury that's going to keep him on the shelf for 6 weeks. Who do you have that you can put outside that can still apply pressure to an opposing defense from the outside X or the Y receiver slot? I don't think there's another Broncos receiver that scares you out wide if you take one of those guys away from this offense. Hence, I think you need another receiver in there that can help you fill that void. So those are the needs that I see fit for the Broncos. Let's see how they address them via the draft. You look at the first round, 28th overall selection, defensive tackle out of North Carolina, Sylvester Williams. Look, I like this pick. We're talking about a 6'3", 320-pound defensive tackle, a big guy that can come in and help you fill that void in the middle of your defense. I think that this defensive scheme that Jack Del Rio wants to employ in Denver, the 4-3 defense, you got to have guys that can eat up space. You got Derek Wolfe last year. I thought he played really well for you in 2012. You put a guy like Sylvester Williams next to him. You also went and got Terrence Knighting in free agency, but he's, to me, an inconsistent player at best. Sylvester Williams is a guy you can throw into the mix. You can start. I think this is a guy you want to start right away. You throw him in the mix, and you can get really good production out of him as a rotational guy. Again, you start him, and at the defensive tackle position, you got to have a lot of bodies. You got to have them in and out. You want to keep these guys fresh. The fresher they are, the more disruptive they are, the more productive they are. And so Sylvester Williams, to me, is a really good addition to this Broncos team. Thought he played really well at North Carolina last season and really rose his stock in this draft. And so I think that the Broncos are going about it the right way, trying to solidify this defensive line, trying to get stronger at the point of attack and more stout at the point of attack in the middle of this defense. And I think it's a great move by the Broncos, getting a guy like Sylvester Williams, defensive tackle out of North Carolina. He's very agile for his size, a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for, very strong at the point of attack. He can be disruptive. He's not a guy that's going to get after the quarterback necessarily, but in the run game, this is the guy you want right there in the middle of your defense, being a consistent force in there to really stop and clog up that middle of your defense. I think it's a great pick by the Broncos. I think it's a triple for the defensive tackle out of North Carolina in the first round, 28th overall selection, Sylvester Williams. I think it's a really good selection, one that down the road will help you in your pursuit of a Super Bowl championship. You look at your second round selection, 58th overall, running back out of Wisconsin, Monty Ball. Here's a guy that does nothing great, everything extremely well. And he's not going to blow you away with speed, power, burst, any of that. What he does is he brings a complete package to the field. And what I mean by that is you get a guy that's going to run block, you get a guy that's going to pass block, you're going to get a guy that's going to run the football very effectively, can catch it out of the backfield. Everything you need to be done out of the running back position, Monty Ball can do it for you. And so he's a 3-down back. Again, he fits into the mold of a Denver Broncos running back. Nothing flashy, nothing extremely athletic, but really solid. You call his name, you call his number, you're going to get production out of Monty Ball. And that's what he was at Wisconsin. He's a guy that broke all the Big Ten records, all the Wisconsin records. And we know Ron Dane set a lot of Wisconsin records running the football. Well, he broke all of them. But here's the thing about Monty Ball. Again, nothing extravagant here. Nothing's going to blow you away about this guy. 5'10", 215, 220. Guy that's going to stick his foot in the ground and go. Good vision. Again, catches the ball really well out of the backfield, can block and pass pro. You're not getting anything extremely over the top here. You're getting a solid NFL back that's going to do his job, do it well, no questions asked. So, to me, it's another triple for the Denver Broncos in the form of running back out of Wisconsin in the second round, 58 overall selection, Monty Ball. Look, if you're playing for a team with Peyton Manning on it, you got to be able to pass block. He's good in pass pro. Always helps if you can run the football. He can do that. And also, always nice if you can catch it out of the backfield as well. Monty Ball can do that. I think he's going to help this Broncos team along. And it's going to spell trouble for one of those Broncos running backs, whether it be Willis McGahee or Noshawn Moreno, because all of them do the same thing. To me, all of them are solid. None of them have top-end speed. None of them bring anything extra to the game. So he's the younger back. He's the younger option. He's the draft pick. He's going to be around for the next 5 to 7 years. One of those guys isn't. If I had to put my money on someone not being around, I'd say it'd probably be Noshawn Moreno. But we'll see how the Broncos address this, because Willis McGahee, to me, is getting up there in age. as well. So wouldn't shock me if he was the guy that was the odd man out. But I don't see the Broncos keeping all of these backs around. Someone has to go, but Monty Ball won't be that guy. So let's take a look at the needs board. Broncos get defensive tackle out of North Carolina, Sylvester Williams. That meets the need. They also get Monty Ball, running back out of Wisconsin. That meets a need as well. So Broncos taking care of some needs early on in this draft. We go on to the third round now. 90th overall selection, cornerback out of South Florida, Kayvon Webster. And this was a surprise to many people because this was a guy that I didn't think would go this high in the draft, but he's got all of the skills you look for in a cornerback. And the production wasn't great at South Florida. Now, the kid can tackle. That's one thing that you don't have to worry about with Kayvon Webster. He's not only an able, but he's a willing tackler. So you know how I feel about that. The guy comes to the party, and he's looking to make sure that he causes some trouble when he gets there. So I don't have a problem with Kayvon Webster in that regard. The guy is willing and able to tackle at the cornerback position. Where I have a gripe with him is the fact that he's not the playmaker that he should be because of the skill sets that he has. His skill set says that he should be a guy that should be all over the football. All over. We're talking about a guy that's, high 4.3s, low 4.4s. So we're talking about 4.41, 4.39 type 40. Okay? So speed is not a question here. That's not even something that we need to debate or discuss. He can run. Very smooth feet and hips. Very fluid athlete. Everything that you think would be synonymous with making plays on a football. But he doesn't trust his eyes all the time. He sees something happening, but he's not sure. And a lot of times what you'll find with some of these cornerbacks that don't want to give up the big play. See, you have to have the mentality that, look, I'm going for it. And look, you can't have it all the time. You got to know down and distance and situation. You got to have situational awareness. Okay? If it's the fourth quarter, your team's up by 10, and you're just trying to make sure you keep everything in front of you, you don't need to gamble for an interception. Make the safe play, make the tackle, keep the clock running, be smart. But when we're in the first quarter and you see something transpiring right in front of you, go and make a play. And sometimes Kayvon Webster doesn't do that because he doesn't trust what he sees. It's right there in front of him. He thinks he knows what's going on. He's not sure, so he doesn't want to make a mistake. So he just allows the receiver to catch the football. Then he goes up and makes a tackle. Well, I have a problem with that, especially when you're as athletic as Kayvon Webster is. We're talking about a 5'11 corner that's about 195, and the kid can run. I just told you he's very fluid as an athlete. I don't think his hands are that bad. You got some cornerbacks that just flat out can't catch. Their hands are made of stone. I don't think that's the case with Kayvon Webster. I just think that Kayvon Webster is a guy that doesn't trust what he sees a lot of times. He sees things happening in front of him. He's not quite sure if it's in fact what he thinks it is or not. And just to be on the safe side, he'll just allow the play to unfold in front of him and then react to it instead of being proactive. I have an issue with that because as a corner, you got to be proactive. You can't be reactive all the time. You got to be proactive. If you want to make plays, you got to be proactive. And Kayvon Webster isn't that 90% of the time. But that's something that can be taught. You can teach a guy to trust his eyes. The more you learn and the more you're comfortable with what you're doing and what you're seeing, the more likely you are to be proactive to something happening. So he can be taught that. So I feel like the Broncos drafted this guy where they drafted him because of the upside, because this guy is so talented, because he's so athletic, because he's got guys in that secondary like a Champ Bailey that can mentor him, give him some pointers, show him the ropes. He'll be better for it. And so I think it's a solid selection. He's very athletic. So anytime you have the athleticism and you have all the prerequisite necessary for the position, all it is coaching at that point. And I think that with some coaching, Kayvon Webster, cornerback out of South Florida in the third round, could be a very good asset to the Denver Broncos It's a triple for me in the third round in the form of Kayvon Webster. We go on to the fifth round, pick 146. This is from the Miami Dolphins, defensive end out of Western Kentucky, Quantaris Smith. Now, this is what you call a height, weight, speed specimen. This is a big guy, 6'5", 250. Now, he isn't a blazer, but he's one of those athletically gifted guys in terms of measurables that you look at and say, hey, with the right coaching, in the right system, this guy could be a nightmare for offensive coaches and offensive lines to block. And so when you take a look at the body of work at Western Kentucky, wasn't the greatest competition that he faced. But, I don't care about that. You know how I feel about that. I don't care who you play against. Dominate. Okay? You go to a Division III school, dominate. You go to a Division II school, dominate. I don't care what the competition around you is. You can't control that. What you can control is how you play on the football field. And so dominate. That's what Quantaris Smith did. Okay? Before he got injured in his senior year, he led the nation with 12.5 sacks. So he was getting it done. And he's got a lot of things that he's got to work on. But he's dangerous. And with the coaching, this is the only thing that I feel like can really hold him back outside of some of the things that he has to work on the field. I'm just talking about strictly off the field type of things. He got injured. And he tore his ACL. And so you don't know what kind of athlete you're getting back after that injury. Everyone does not respond from surgery the same way. Everyone's not Adrian Peterson. Everyone's not just going to come back better than ever. This isn't Tommy John surgery. I think people are starting to get so used to people having ACL surgeries, they expect them to just come back as if nothing ever happened. I think we're starting to become numb to the fact that these surgeries aren't ho-hum. They don't just happen and you just come back better than ever. There is no standard way of coming back from this. Adrian Peterson isn't the norm. So when a guy has ACL surgery, like Darrelle Revis is coming back from, you don't know if Darrelle Revis is going to come back and still be Darrelle Revis, owner of Revis Island. He could come back and be an ordinary Joe Schmo corner in this league. And people, I think, are starting to make the mistake, and it's starting to become synonymous that, hey, you get injured, you tear your ACL, you'll just come back and you'll be fine. No. Go ask a guy like Terrell Thomas, is that the case? Go ask a guy like Thomas Davis, is that the case? You tear your ACL once, you're more susceptible and more likely to tear it again. And so it's no laughing matter, and Quantaris Smith is coming back from ACL injury. And so that's a question that I have is, are we getting the same Quantaris Smith that was wreaking havoc in the Sun Belt Conference that had 12.5 sacks before the injury? Or are we getting a different guy coming back from that injury? We'll see. But on the field, 6'5", 250, really long athlete. So he's able to get his hands on offensive linemen before they can get their hands on him, which allows him to work. Now, isn't explosive in the form of a first step, which you would love him to have, but it's not there. And you can't coach explosion. Either you have it or you don't. So what he lacks in explosion, he makes up for in length, motor, and just athletic ability. Okay, this guy is still athletic even though he isn't explosive. And so if he gets his hands on the tackle, is able to get him off balance, he'll go right by him. And so Quantaris Smith is an interesting prospect, a guy that could be vital for the Broncos down the road, especially without Elvis Dumervil moving forward. You could use a guy off the edges that can get pressure on the quarterback. And he's one of these guys that can stand up or put his hand in the ground, so he's very versatile. I think you got a very interesting and intriguing prospect here in Quantaris Smith. Now, the only question is, will he be able to help you in 2013? Because he's going to need time to allow this ACL to heal. And he's not going to participate in a lot of your camps because he's going to be out rehabbing. And so he's got a long track back to being able to play football on the field. But if you're willing to work with this guy, if you're willing to invest the time necessary to help this guy make the transition from college to the National Football League, you could have yourself a really good football player here in Quantera Smith, defensive end out of Western Kentucky in the 5th round at 146. Now, it's a double for me because of the ACL tear, because I don't know how effective this guy's going to be coming off of that injury. So I got questions. I want to see this because I'm really high on Quantera Smith. I think that he's one of those guys that quietly went about his business at a small school in a small conference. But I think that he can get it done in the National Football League. But with this injury, now question marks have arose, and I got to see how he rebounds from this ACL tear. So we go on to the next 5th round selection, 161st overall selection, wide receiver out of Georgia, Tavares King. Now, he's about 6 feet, buck 90, buck 85, somewhere in that general vicinity. To me, he's one of those receivers. I call him a herky-jerky receiver. In other words, he's a two-hand tag receiver. He doesn't want you to touch him. And not saying that he's not physical, which he isn't really, but not saying that he can't handle physical contact. But he preferred you didn't touch him. This guy's pretty light at 190. And he had to put on muscle just to get to that point. He was at Georgia at one point at about a buck 75. And so he did some work just to get to 190. And so he's got a lot more work to do to get to probably about 200 pounds because he's not physical enough. And he's a guy that drops passes because he didn't want you to touch him. So he's trying to juke you before he catches the football. Sometimes he takes his eyes off the football before he catches it, leads to drops. Sometimes he does so many moves at the stem of his route that there's no fluidity to the route that he's running, and the timing is off, and so there's a miscommunication between he and the quarterback. Sometimes he just does too much. Even when he catches the ball, instead of him going up the field, he wants to make 3 or 4 juke moves. Again, because he's playing two-hand touch. He doesn't want you to touch him. He prefer that you didn't put a hand on him so that he can run freely. But in this league, there's going to be contact. You're going to have to deal with it. And so he needs to be a little bit stronger in every aspect of his game. Blocking, catching the football, shedding defenders. He can use a little bit of strength in every single facet of his game. But in terms of athleticism, fluidity as an athlete, great feet, in and out of his breaks, catching the football, understanding route concepts. He's got all of that down pat. There isn't a glitch or hitch in his game there. The question with him is all mental. Of course, he needs to get stronger. And that's something that the Broncos will probably address once he gets there. But from a mental aspect, hey, get tough, get physical mentally. You're not afraid of these guys. And so, hey, you don't have to make 5 juke moves to get 5 yards. Catch the football, go up the field, get what you can get. If you can make a guy miss in the process, awesome. But if you can't, get what's there. Don't juke and hesitate and run backwards. All in the name of getting 7 yards. When 7 yards is already available to you if you just catch it and go up the field. So, if Tavares King can just do all of the little things better, get stronger in the weight room, you've got that receiver that I was talking about that you need that can play out wide in case of an emergency. Right now, you don't need Tavares King to come in and light it up. You've got 3 excellent receivers on your football team right now. He can learn. He can be that 4th or 5th guy down the road, that option that's sitting there on the depth chart that in case of an emergency, you break the glass and you break out Tavares King. But right now, he's not a necessity. And that's a great thing for him because he has a lot to learn. But I like this pick. I think it's a solid selection, a guy that you can bring along slowly in the process. Wide receiver out of Georgia in the 5th round, Tavares King, to me is a double. You work on this guy, you get him to where you want him to be as a receiver, and then you unleash him on the AFC West. So now we move on to the 6th round, pick 173 from the Philadelphia Eagles, offensive tackle out of West Virginia, Vincent Painter. Now, Vincent Painter is a guy that came to football a lot later than you would like. He's very raw, got to Virginia Tech, and was on the defensive side of football. He didn't start playing football until high school. So there's a lot to learn for Vincent Painter. But athletically, he's gifted. 6'4", 310, runs a 4.9 40. So right there, you know you're dealing with an athlete at the tackle position. Now, again, he got to Virginia Tech. He was a defensive tackle. They moved him to offensive tackle after his redshirt freshman year, and he learned how to play offensive tackle from that point forward. So, again, you're only dealing with a guy that has experience on the offensive side of the football for about 3 or 4 years. So, there's a lot that Vincent Painter has to learn. But again, much like Tavares King, Quantera Smith, Kayvon Webster, if you're willing to teach this guy, and by you drafting him, you know there's work to be done in the 6th round. If you're willing to work with this guy, and he doesn't have to start right now, the Broncos have a perfectly solid offensive line to this point. So he can learn. You can draft this guy and stash him on your practice squad if you like. Continue to coach him up. And maybe in 2 or 3 years, this guy's ready to help you. Coach him up now, he can give you depth right away. So it's a solid selection by the Denver Broncos for a guy that still needs to learn a lot. A lot of seasoning has to be done here with Vincent Painter because he's extremely raw. But you've seen enough on tape at Virginia Tech to give you the comfort of knowing that if we get this guy where we need him to be, he's going to be a very productive football player for us. And I think that's the case with Vincent Painter. So, offensive tackle out of Virginia Tech, 6th round, 173rd overall selection. Vincent Painter is a double in the 6th round. So you wrap up this draft in the 7th round, 234th overall selection, quarterback out of Miami of Ohio, Zach Dysert. And to me, it seems like the Broncos are simply acquiring quarterbacks. They don't know who's going to be the heir apparent to Peyton Manning. But they do know this. They want that guy to already have been on the roster, learning behind Peyton Manning, performing well in the preseason, showing good command of the playbook and what the Broncos are trying to do offensively. And that's the guy they're going to turn the reins over to once Peyton Manning leaves. Sort of like the Aaron Rodgers situation in Green Bay. You have this guy sitting behind the legend, learning the nuances of the quarterback position, how to play it, how to study in the film room, how to prepare week in and week out. And once that legend leaves, the next guy that you have as the heir apparent slides in, and that transition is seamless. So the Broncos right now don't know if that guy is Brock Osweiler or he could be Zach Dysert. And a lot of people have compared Zach Dysert to Ben Roethlisberger. Of course, they went to the same college, Miami of Ohio. They both played in Ohio, both shattered a lot of high school records in Ohio. But to me, Dysert has a lot of similarities, but he's not as big and as physical a specimen as Ben Roethlisberger is. We know Roethlisberger is a 6'5", 245-pound quarterback. He's a big man. And I might be being generous with the 245. He might be even bigger than that. But Dysert is 6'3", 230. So from that standpoint, we're not talking about the same guy. He can't take the kind of punishment Ben can. And even Ben can't take the kind of punishment that Ben takes sometimes. And so he loves to run around, though, does Dysert, much like Ben Roethlisberger. He likes to extend plays, make things happen with his feet. Now, Ben scrambles and extends plays to throw the football down the field. Dysert, on the other hand, if his first and second options aren't available, he panics, he takes off. So it's not the same dynamic here as it was for Ben Roethlisberger, who's looking to extend the play to find someone down the field. Dysart is looking to get rid of the football, but if it's not there, he's just going to run. He's going to pack the football up and take off running. And he's a guy that's not afraid to throw the football on the run, has a very strong arm, strong enough to chuck it 40, 45 yards down the field, off of one leg while scrambling. And so sometimes that arm strength and that that trust in that arm strength for Dysart gets him in trouble because he tries to fit footballs into tight spaces, and he also has a bad habit of throwing the football across his body sometimes. That's a cardinal sin in the National Football League. You don't throw the football back across your body. And I think that there's a lot of little kinks that you have to work out of his game. But, again, he's not playing anytime soon. And so you've got plenty of time to work out all the little things that annoy you about Zach Dysart and his game. And so I think it's a solid pick for the Broncos. Again, you're looking for that next guy, and you don't know who he is yet. So the best way to go about it, get a couple of guys, get them in camp, get them some experience in the preseason, let them learn from Peyton, and then you figure out who your guy down the road is going to be. And now Zach Dysart is going to be in that mix. It's a double for Zach Dysart, quarterback out of Miami of Ohio. I think it's a solid selection. He's got some things he can work on, but athletic-wise, he's solid. He's not great, not elite, but he's solid. He can move. He's a great bootleg quarterback, and he's got the arm strength to do anything on the football field. He just has to have better pocket awareness, know when the pressure is around you, and he's got to limit the mistakes, the mental mistakes. Can't throw across your body. If it's not there, don't force it. Those kind of things you can coach out of a player. I think Zach Dysart will be fine over time, but I'd love to see what will happen once he's coached up and given an opportunity. And we'll probably get to see that down the road with the Broncos after Peyton Manning has given up the throne in Denver. So you look at this draft, and let's go ahead and clean up his needs board. You get the receiver Tavares King out of Georgia. No linebackers here in this draft, but I think that in this defense, you're looking more for a defensive end, and Quanterra Smith might be that guy. He probably won't be able to help you that much in 2013, but maybe down the road, Quanterra Smith could be a very viable option for you on the defensive side of the football. So look at the draft as a whole for the Broncos. Sylvester Williams, triple. Ball, triple. Webster, triple. Smith, King, Painter, and Dysart, all doubles. It's a double for the Denver Broncos in this draft. I think they did a great job at the first two selections of getting guys that can help you right now, because the Broncos are in win-now mode. With Peyton Manning as your quarterback, you're not looking to build for the future. You're looking to win now. Now, of course, in this draft, there are some players that you're looking for to help you down the road. But in your first 2 or 3 selections, if you're the Broncos, you want guys that can help you right away. And Sylvester Williams and Monty Ball are going to do exactly that. And Peyton Manning is in win-now mode. He's not a guy that's looking to win 5 years down the road. Peyton Manning is playing year to year. And so you want to have every opportunity to win. Sylvester Williams and Monty Ball give you that kind of opportunity. They can come in and play right away. And so I think the Broncos did upgrade their roster in some areas. I think people have really overreacted to the bad game that the safeties for the Broncos had against the Baltimore Ravens in the postseason. Keep in mind, this Denver Broncos defense was really good in the regular season. And Raheem Moore mistimed his jump. It was terrible. He really botched that whole play. But he's still a really good young safety. And I think that the Broncos are fine in that secondary. They have a lot of young, talented cornerbacks as well. And so you add Kayvon Webster to that mix. You still got Champ Bailey, who's still playing at a really good level. I think you're fine defensively. Where you're going to hurt is no more Elvis Dumervil. You guys really botched that whole process. Elvis botched that whole process. his former agent. Everyone involved really dropped the ball on that one. And I think the team that's really going to suffer the most from this is the Denver Broncos, because 10.5 sacks, hard to replicate that on this football team without that guy being there that got you that 10.5 sack total in 2012. We know Elvis Dumervil is a sack getter in this league. Hard to replace those kind of numbers. And he was a good guy in the locker room as well. And so now you don't have that two-headed monster anymore. So you're going to have to find a way to produce and get to the quarterback. Your defense was as good as it was because you were able to get pressure on the quarterback consistently. You take that away, and you could have some problems on your hand. You still have Von Miller, but Von Miller is a lot harder to defense when you got to worry about Elvis Dumervil on the other side. Now that that threat on the other side isn't there, now you can just slide protection to wherever Von Miller lines up in hopes that you can help block him that way. So going to see how the Broncos fare in the 2013 season, but this draft is a double for the Broncos. It's a solid draft. I wasn't blown away by any one of their selections. I think they just made a lot of solid selections. Guys that can help now, guys that can help down the road. And so that's going to do it for the Denver Broncos in the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up.
Draft Zone.